Hi, everybody. My name is Richard Lesperance. I go by the name of my man Richard. Welcome to a better lifestyle. Today, we're going to talk about asset protection. So, if you're an entrepreneur or business owner, take a pen and take notes because I think you guys are going to learn a lot. So, I have my guest with me, so I never want to mess up his last name. So, please introduce yourself. He's a
Yeah.
business lawyer, by the way. So, yeah.
Yes, my name is Rob Sigampeglia. Siglampeglia, that's how you say the name. Yes, and I am an attorney. I represent many different sized businesses, so that's one of the things that I do.
Okay. Throughout your career, what have you noticed in regards to asset protection?
So one of the main ways to protect assets and the best way to protect an asset, your assets as a business owner, is to set up some kind of corporate structure, either a corporation, an LLC. Um, that will protect your personal assets from your business. So whatever your business is, if you're selling products, if you're a service business, you can set up an LLC so that in case something happens with the business, the only thing that's responsible is the business. So they're not going to be able to get your house, they're not going to be able to get your car, your bank accounts, any of those things. So that's the number one way to protect assets. Another way is to get insurance. You can get general liability insurance, workers' comp if you have employees, E&O or errors and omissions if you are running a service business. All of those things will protect your personal assets.
Business owners, if there's a joint venture, they could also protect themselves. Like one buys an insurance on the other person, and vice versa, right?
Yes, you can get what that's called key man insurance. So that's normally required. Um, like say I was to set up an LLC, and we're going to start up a financial company. Um, and if one of the partners passes, um, it could cause a big problem. So in your agreement, you'll normally require key man insurance so that the business will buy insurance on both partners. And as you call it, a joint venture. There could be a joint venture agreement too, where it's two companies working together or two people working together. And then what that does is it covers, the insurance will cover so that if one of the main partners passes away, it'll get capital into the business so that the business can either be wound up or you can get another partner to replace the key person. But yeah, key man insurance is definitely um, another aspect of insurance that companies can get if they're in that situation where there's, you know, it can be more than two. Like say there's six people that are running a business together and they all have key roles in the business. And if one of them passed, it would be it was to disrupt the business big time. Then that's why you'd want to get the insurance. So
What would you say is the misconception of asset protection?
misconception as to
Like
the
the
owner themselves.
Yeah, like the myths, like in regards to the whole thing.
So one of the main misconceptions that I get or that I hear is that if you're a sole proprietor, um, no one's going to sue me. Well, they're not going to sue me. Like I hear that all the time. I know there's no risk. My business is very low risk. No one's going to sue me. So they won't set up an LLC. They'll be a sole proprietor or general partnership. And when you're operating as a sole proprietorship or in general partner, all your personal assets are at risk. So the one thing that I know for sure is there's always a chance you could be sued because people can sue you for anything. Like I have a case right now. I have a client that he narrated a book, so he was the narrator of the book, and the company sent them a picture of the book cover to put up on his blog so that he can promote it. Well, the original picture that the book cover was based on sent them a cease and desist notice and said that he needed to pay like $2,000 because they said that he was infringing on the photo. So like, and they don't go away. So this is a case where he never thought he'd be going to court, but he could be. So, and for something like that, just for using a photo that that you actually were narrator on, and he could end up in court. So that's why that's what I told him. I said, see, this is why you people assume that, oh, I'm not going to go to court. No one's going to sue me, but you can be sued for anything. You can be sued because they don't like the color of your hair. That's why the courts are there. So the courts are there they're the ones that determine who's right, who's wrong. So anybody can file a lawsuit to get the court to decide who's right or who's wrong.
Any situation that you recall that went wrong?
Excuse me. Yeah. I mean, it's so there's most of the times when I see issues that is where, like, for workers' comp, if you're an employer and you don't have workers' comp insurance, then the state will step in and pay, but then they go after the owner. So I've had those issues lots of times where, for whatever reason, the company thought they were hiring somebody as an independent contractor, but the person gets hurt, and then they file a comp claim, and then they don't have insurance for that person because they thought they were an independent contractor and that they didn't have to cover them as an employee. So that's taking out a big risk, because then the state can they can fine you, they can put you in jail if it's bad enough. Normally they don't. Normally what they would do is they would pay out and they'd sue you to get recovered. And that doesn't matter at that point if you're an LLC or if you're have some kind of structure, because in that case they can go after you personally if you didn't get the insurance when you were supposed to get the insurance. So that's an example.
What about if people have businesses outside of the country, internationally?
Yep. So international adds another layer, because then you have to worry about where you're doing business. So if you're doing business in the US, you have to worry about the laws of the country where you're operating, plus whatever laws of the country where you're doing business, like the US. Say the business is, like, I have international clients too. I have some clients in the UK. So they're doing business there. They're operating there, but they're doing business with United States companies. So they have to worry about UK laws and they have to worry about US laws in that case. And a lot of times it's tax issues that they're dealing with. So if they don't step foot in the US, then they don't have to pay income tax here. They may have to pay some other kind of tax, but they're not, income tax, are not going to have to worry about it. But those are issues that people that have offshore companies have to work those things out, figure out what tax structure or what taxes they're responsible for, and what laws that they need to abide by. Like, for instance, in Europe they have a different privacy law than we have here. So on your website, if you do international sales or international business, you have to put on your website, your terms of service, you have to abide by the European privacy laws. So you need to put all the disclosures on there that are required by Europe. Otherwise, if you're doing business there, then you can get in trouble here, even if you're here in the United States. So that's where an example where you have to conform your business to the laws of the country that you're doing business in.
So do you mean? So if someone has an online shop, it could cause problems if they're selling in the UK.
Correct.
So what in the terms of services, what has to be in that section?
It's called GPIDR. I forget what it stands for, but it's the European privacy regulation, and it basically talks about the age. So if you're under 16, you have to have special ways that you keep their information and store the information. So like if they put their email address in there or their regular home address, you have to protect that information if they're a minor more than you have to protect them if they're over age of majority 18. But you still have to. There's still rules on how you protect personal information that you get from people. So in Europe, it's and then also um, like spamming here. You know you're not supposed to. You can't spam it here. But if somebody sends you their email address, then you can send them a blast, an email blast. But in Europe, you can't do that. Like you can't spam. You can't send spam out at all. And that has to be in the terms of service on your website.
So what happens? So okay, so you have an online shop, but you have different people that are buying from different countries. So how do you control that? You might have
Yep.
people, you might have people that is buying from Asia, from Africa, from. So how does that work?
Yep. So you just have to make sure that your terms of service, if there are special laws in Asia or in Africa, you have to just make sure that your terms of service talks about all those different laws in those different areas. So if you go on like say Amazon's, if you go on their terms of service, you'll see that like they have different paragraphs for different parts of the world. So you have to make sure your terms of service and that you abide by that, of course. You're abiding by the laws.
So does someone has to get a lawyer involved, or they could do it themselves?
If you're talking about doing terms of service for different parts of the world, I would definitely get an international attorney involved. You know, somebody that understands international law to draft the terms of service for you. You know, like because there may be a product or something that you can't sell to certain area parts of the world. You know, like China, they may have restrictions on what products you can sell there. And if you, you know, like you can't sell, it's illegal to sell sometimes of drugs, right? In the United States. So China has their own rules on what you can and can't sell. And it may be legal here, but not there. So you have to make sure that you're putting that in your terms of service and you're also not selling those illegal products because otherwise you know, obviously you can get into trouble. You get into legal trouble by doing it. So I would, if you're going to be selling it depends on what it is, but I would just consult with an attorney to say, you know, oh, do I need special terms of service? Do I need to know anything? It's always it's always safe to do that.
So it goes the same for what if someone has a website too, right?
Well, the website you'd want to set up the terms of service, right? But if you're selling things off the website, you know, you're selling products, then you'd also want to ask if those products are legal in all parts of the world.
So this crossed my mind. So there's so much stuff online. I'm not sure that everybody knows about those things.
I'm sure that I'm sure that there are people that you know just pop up, put up. But well, it also depends on where you're putting the platform. You know, like if you're going to go on to an established platform already, you know, like Amazon or Shopify, they do. You don't have to worry about it. There, you're going to go under their terms of service. So that's a way you can protect yourself is by already going through an established platform. Um, and then they're going to already know what products can be sold in different parts of the world. They're not going to let you do it. So they won't let you list it. So that's a way to that's an easier way to protect yourself. I'm talking about if you're setting up your own website, you know, you're setting up a company and you're going to sell products off of your website. Then you have to worry yourself about drafting your terms of service and making sure your products are conforming with the laws of where you're going to be selling them. So I'm sure a lot of people just pop up on, you know, they do pop-up shops and they don't need to worry about it. So
So you talk a little bit about the benefits of asset protection, like whichever structure that someone chooses. Is there any limitation to asset protection?
um yeah, I mean, there's always a chance that if you don't set up your structure properly and you like if say you're setting up an LLC and you don't set up a separate bank account and you don't have an operating agreement, there's always a chance that if you do get sued, um, whoever sues you can ask the court to set aside your structure. It's called piercing the corporate veil, and then go after you personally. So the limitation is you have to make sure that you conform your LLC with whatever requirements, whatever regulations there are. For instance, most LLCs or corporations have to file an annual report with the state where they're registered. And if you don't file that report, you could be put into an inactive status, or some kind of suspended status, or you can even get your license, the permission revoked by the state. And if that's the case, then it's just you left. So they could sue you personally. They could pierce the corporate veil and go after you personally. So that's a limitation. You have to make sure that if you do set up the structure, that you do it, you stay on top of it and you maintain it and you do it properly. And the other thing that I see is when people set up LLCs, they don't fund it. So you need to, like when you set up an LLC, you need to fund it. You need to get a bank account and put some money in the bank account, $10, whatever. And then that's how you fund your LLC. Because if you have an LLC and you're putting all the revenue into your personal account, you've commingled, and then the LLC is invalid because then they can just go after you personally. So you have to follow the rules as well when you set up a corporate structure to make sure that you're getting the full benefit of protecting your personal assets.
What about estate planning?
Yep. So estate planning, you can actually use LLCs to do some estate planning. I've seen people set up LLCs to put their property in. Or you could set up trusts, living trusts, to put property in it so that you avoid probate. But you should at minimum have a will. If you have a will, that's the biggest form of protection. So that the state doesn't say where your property is going to go when you pass away. So at a minimum, get a will. And if you want to do some more detailed estate planning, you could talk about trusts, you could talk about LLCs, life insurance. There's even life insurance where you can finance the premiums, which is a little more sophisticated. But if you're getting like a 10 or $20 million policy because you have a lot of assets, you can actually, instead of paying $100,000 in cash for the premium, you can actually, you can finance it. So there are premium finance deals that you could do for life insurance, or you can get annuities too. So you can set up, if you're worried about when you retire, Social Security is not going to be enough, which it's not. You can get an annuity so that you'll get paid monthly at a set amount based on how much you put in. And you'll get paid that amount until you pass away for your whole life. So those are all estate planning mechanisms that can help an individual plan for, when they pass, which no one wants to think about, but it's going to happen to us all, unfortunately.
And what about creditor protection and bankruptcy?
Yep. So, I mean, creditor protection and bankruptcy, that's one of the reasons why you want to set up an LLC or a company, because if something, say, use my example earlier where the company didn't get workers' comp insurance and they got a judgment against them. Besides the state they'll have to deal with, but they can, if they got a judgment against them, they can file bankruptcy for their company and they don't have to file personal bankruptcy. So if you set up separate companies, the companies themselves can file bankruptcy and it doesn't affect you personally. So that's another reason why to set up structures. If for some reason you just get into too much debt, you always have personal bankruptcy that you can do. So you can either do a restructure, Chapter 11, or you can do a full liquidation, Chapter 7, where you sell all your assets. But Chapter 11 is where they try to restructure the plan so that they figure out your assets, your debts, and then each creditor is going to take a little less, and you pay it back over time. And that's also a form of bankruptcy that you can go through as personally if you want to, if you wanted to do that. There's actually businesses that go through Chapter 11 too, sometimes, where they restructure and they don't completely close their doors, but they restructure their debts. So it's available for business and it's available for personal.
You talked a little bit about the other person, the book, like the narrative before. When you do a partnership and all that, what's how's the asset protection structure for that?
So if you're doing a general partnership, then what that means is each individual partner is responsible for the business. So, and each individual partner can bind the other. So, like, say the business, you have your partnership and you want to buy a truck for the business. Well, one of the partners can sign and it binds both partners. So, you definitely should have a partnership agreement if you're going to do that. That lays out how that's going to get paid back, and who's going to be ultimately responsible if the business fails. Or you could set up, if you set up an LLC or a limited partnership, then you could write an operating agreement as to how the business is going to deal with that, and then generally the money would get paid back out of the business. So if a member signs on behalf of an LLC to buy the truck, the LLC has to pay it back, and not the individual members. So that's a way to control how assets are distributed through an LLC, through a company.
And what about the cost of setting up all those things? What were we talking
Yep.
about?
Yeah. So to do a simple LLC, it should cost under $1,000. It's a few $100s to file with the state, and then you'll pay an attorney to do all the documentation for you, your operating agreement, and your paperwork that you're going to file. Corporation, maybe a little more, a couple of thousand for a corporation if you're going to go fully with a corporation that has president, secretary, stockholders. Um, and that's the difference between a corporation and an LLC. Corporation, you have shares of stockholders, and then officers. So you'd have a president, at least a president, but usually president, vice president, secretary, treasurer are usually your officers for a corporation, versus an LLC where they're members. So you can go from one to as many members as you want in most states. Some states have limits on how many members you can have, but there's no stock or anything like that. You're just members, so you're more like a partner. If you don't use an LLC and you just do a general partnership, the LLC looks more like a sole proprietorship if you're one, or more like a partnership if you're two or more. So, and it's really a pretty it's an inexpensive way to protect your assets. So
Last words in regards to everything we've talked about.
yeah, I mean, I have seen LLCs and I've seen companies structures save many business owners from losing all their money and having to go bankrupt. So um, if you're out there in business, um, even if it's a side hustle, just set up an LLC and run your company through an LLC. That way you can sleep at night. You don't have to worry about people coming after you personally and taking all your personal assets that you've worked hard for. So that's the bottom line. And some people come in and they're like, well, I want to see if the business does okay before I set up my LLC. And that's not a good idea because if you're going to come, like, say you're going to come in and start a pizza place, right? You don't want to see like how many pizzas you sell before you set up your LLC, because if someone falls or something, you're going to be personally responsible. So you should just set it up the first day that you say, I want to go into business, set up your LLC, get your bank account, and then you have nothing more to worry about. Run everything through that bank account, and you're separating your personal assets from your company.
Where can people find you on social media or the internet?
You can find me everywhere on social media, Facebook, TikTok, LinkedIn. Um, my website is robscigesq.com, robsigesq.com.